Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to thank my colleague, Congressman O'Rourke, my fellow West Texan, with whom I share the privilege of representing El Paso County, for yielding to me this time to talk about some issues that are critical to the border. And I have to say, Mr. Speaker, that I don't want to use any incendiary rhetoric. I don't want to use any flashy words, because frankly, I think that the people of this country elected the members of Congress not to cheerlead or use harsh rhetoric or add fuel to fires, but to solve problems. So I'd like to talk about some of the challenges that, in real terms, this Congress has the opportunity to make a difference on. The 23rd Congressional District, which I have the privilege of representing, runs some 800 miles along the Texas-Mexico border. It includes 5 ports of entry: Eagle Pass, Del Rio, Presidio, Fabens, and Zaragoza Isleta in El Paso. No other congressional district shares a larger border with Mexico. The district is both rural and urban, and frankly, it looks like what the rest of Texas will soon look like, because it is evenly split between Democrats and Republicans. Because this district has the largest border with Mexico, the policy discussion about border security, about immigration reform, these conversations greatly impact the 23rd District. Frankly, they impact the entire state of Texas. The passage or failure of immigration reform will profoundly affect us all. In Texas, there are approximately 1.7 million unauthorized immigrants, comprising 6.7% of the state's population. According to a 2006 report from the Texas Comptroller of Public Accounts, who was a Republican officeholder at the time, she indicated in her report the absence of the estimated 1.4 million undocumented immigrants in Texas in fiscal year 2005 would have been a loss to our gross state product of $17.7 billion. Well, as public servants, as I indicated early on, the weight of our words is rather heavy. I've asked the current controller to provide an updated study to shed some light on the true impact, the current impact that our state has as a result of these undocumented immigrants. The study would ensure that all 38 members of Congress from Texas and everyone else can have adequate information during what is a very important policy debate. A more recent study from the Immigration Policy Center noted that if all unauthorized immigrants were removed from Texas, the state would lose $69.3 billion in economic activity. The state would also lose $30.8 billion in gross state product and approximately 403,174 jobs, even accounting for adequate market adjustment time. Well, after more than 2 decades, I am very encouraged that comprehensive immigration reform is clearing hurdles in the Senate. I'm hoping that our colleagues in the House will take it up as well as soon as possible. Make no mistake, the legislation that's in the Senate, it's not what I would have drafted. Those of us on the border know that what we need are more customs and border protection agents at our ports of entry. Many jobs in Texas, much of our economy, in fact, is inextricably linked to international trade. In fact, more than 50 million Americans work for companies that engage in international trade. That comes to us from the U.S. Department of the Treasury. Trade with Mexico represents one of our biggest economic drivers and pumps billions of dollars into our economy. Every day, think of this, $1 billion in cross-border commerce happens between the U.S. and Mexico. That equates to some $45 million in commerce per hour. Staffing increases at our ports would decrease wait times at our ports of entry, would increase security, and would lead to more effective screening and entry for those who are traveling, as well as for imports that are coming into the United States. It is those long lines at our ports of entry that hinder economic development and harm our economy. Yes, it is true. No one will argue that our nation's doorways must be secure, and that our trade and our commerce along the border, on which many small and large businesses depend, must be allowed to move efficiently. And I'm hopeful that as debate on the immigration issue continues, as we continue our conversations, that we can increase the staffing at CBP, a policy move that does, in all truth, make sense for Texas. But as far as the fence is concerned, the border fence, in a time of tight budgets, I have to say that I'm very perplexed as to why Congress would spend so much money on an ineffective project. You'd be hard-pressed to find too many Texans, particularly those who live and work or have been raised along the border, who support the notion of a fence. Let me give you a couple of examples and a couple of quotes. The idea that you're going to build a wall from Brownsville to El Paso is it's ridiculous on its face. That quote comes from the governor of Texas, Rick Perry, just last year. How about this quote? The border fence is a 19th century solution to a 21st century problem. That quote comes to us from Senator John Cornyn of Texas in 2006. As I've said, I'm opposed to the notion of a border fence and would rather that we shore up our ports to speed up commerce. A fence isn't something that those of us who represent the border support, but we understand that it is important to bring families out of the shadows. Economically, here is what comprehensive immigration reform means to those of us along the border and elsewhere, to each and every one of us. It means that our deficits will decrease, while GDP, productivity, investment, and employment will increase. Our country will save over $1 trillion, or about $1 trillion, over the next 2 decades. More than 10 million people will pay $459 billion just in income and payroll taxes during the first 10 years. And over that decade, we will reduce the federal deficit by $197 billion and will add more than $200 billion into the Social Security Trust Fund. The decade after that, comprehensive immigration reform will reduce the federal deficit by $700 billion. In Texas, all the key players are standing steadfast for immigration reform. It's supported by the Chambers of Commerce. It's supported by the Texas Farm Bureau. It's supported by labor. And it's supported by public opinion in our state because it makes economic sense. My paternal grandfather worked cattle and founded a small family restaurant that launched our family into the middle class. My maternal grandfather built fences across the hardscrabble landscape of far west Texas. And today, I have the privilege of representing the 23rd District in Congress. In this nation, our values teach us that families stick together and that hard work, not circumstances, should shape our future. It really is a country of opportunity. Our nation becomes stronger as more people pledge allegiance to our flag and commit themselves fully to our nation and to our economy. I'm hopeful that we can move quickly on this very important policy matter that greatly impacts not only the 23rd District, but the entire state of Texas and, frankly, our country as a whole. Immigration reform is right, the time is right, and Texans are counting on us. It is significant. If you've ever been in the Texas Capitol, years ago, our forefathers and foremothers who built that beautiful pink granite building faced the front door in a certain direction. Our front door of the state capitol doesn't face north towards Washington. Our front door faces south towards Mexico. The front door to our nation, as Governor Richards used to refer to it, is a very important doorway for trade, for commerce. It's historically significant not only for Texas, but for the rest of our country. Again, immigration reform is right for Texas, it's right for America, and it's something that this Congress should make sure happens as soon as possible. With that, again, Mr. Speaker, I'm very grateful to Congressman O'Rourke for yielding me this time, and I'd yield back the balance of my time.
I want to thank Representative Gallego